A busy day throughout the NHL and the trade deadline with a quiet slate of games. Where are the Minnesota Wild in terms of trading some of their players? We will discuss, as well as taking a look at how the rest of the week should play out on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duhaime, and this is Locked on Wild.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Isaac Johnson joins us to take a look at where things stand with the Minnesota Wild ahead of the trade deadline. We'll take a look at how things have played out so far to try to get a better picture as to what the Wild could potentially get before the deadline. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, credentialed Wild media member. And as mentioned, Isaac Johnson joining us here today, runs the All Things Wild Instagram account and just helping us kind of reset after a busy day in the NHL here today. Isaac, how are things going?
They're going pretty good.
It's going to be a busy end to the week. Trade deadline, obviously, on Friday, but with the fact that there were only 3 games on the schedule tonight, the NHL decided to get a little bit of a head start with a ton of moves made here today. And the Minnesota Wild's not involved in any of them at this point. Isaac, when you saw all of these different moves going on here today, Colorado Avalanche made a couple of trades, Edmonton Oilers. There was a bunch that happened here today. Florida Panthers getting involved too. Were you surprised to see that the Wild didn't get involved in any of the deals that happened?
Not necessarily. I feel like Bill Guerin always makes us wait. I feel like last year, I feel like he made like all of those deals like at the end of the day. So didn't really expect, much from them today, but hopefully some things will pick up. I don't know with them being, where they are in the standings. I don't know how much, wheeling and dealing they'll do, but, hopefully they can make a couple deals that, we can talk about.
Yeah, that's the big key, is that financially and contract-wise, there just isn't really going to be a lot that does happen here at this trade deadline. And we're going to key in on Michael Russo and Joe Smith's latest on the trade deadline here quite a bit in this episode. But the piece that I'll start with is a question asked about if any Wild players with no move clauses will waive in order to be traded. And Russo comes out and says, in no particular terms, no, unless Alex Goligoski has a change of heart, but he's been here and hasn't played a ton, so there doesn't seem to be any reason for him to change his mind there. Russo does say if a team asked about Marcus Johansson, Guerin would at least ask to see if there was any interest in Johansson going somewhere else. But the trade deadline is not the time a team is going to try to acquire players with a lot of term, like Marcus Foligno or Ryan Hartman. Once they got those extensions, they likely became impossible to move with or without the no-move clauses. Teams want rentals this time of year. So it wasn't going to be a tough or an active deadline for the Wilds regardless. Which I think is kind of, if we're looking at things, I think that's why the Wild haven't done anything yet, is because a lot of these guys on the roster are locked in for long-term deals, and guys like Brandon Duhaime and Connor Dewar are probably lower on the priority list for playoff teams than some of these other guys that we've seen traded so far. Is that a fair assessment?
Sorry, you cut out. What did you say again?
The Wilds were never going to have an active deadline just because the few guys that they have that are movable just are not high up on the priorities list of some of these playoff teams. Like they're fourth line guys that can give you some physicality, but beyond that, not a ton of impact that could be added by some of these playoff contenders here at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, the only really movable guys that they have is Duhaime, Dewar. I don't even know if they can really move Maroon now because he's hurt, so I feel like that could scare some teams away. This is probably speculation because everyone does this time of year, but Marcus Johansson left practice today. Do we think that, and I know he has control over where he goes, so he gets to dictate that, but do we think that, maybe Guerin's asked him if he, wants to waive and go elsewhere? Cause, I think that could be interesting. I don't know what you could get for him though, because he has not had that great of a year, and definitely other teams see that same stuff that we do. So, but I did find that interesting that he did come out of practice today.
Yeah, that was a notable. I was a little surprised by that myself, but I don't think you're going to get a ton for return for Johansson because he signs next season, and as you alluded to, he just hasn't done a ton, and that's the other part of this that is going to lead to this being a probably quiet deadline is none of the guys that are potentially tradable in Dewar, Duhaime, or Maroon, they've all been pretty inconsistent too. Duhaime he brings the spark and the energy every night, but he hasn't had a great year by his standards. Connor Dewar has been streaky, and as you said, Pat Maroon is hurt, and so we're just kind of seeing the byproduct of when a lot of different things go wrong. It just means that a lot of teams just aren't generally interested in what you have to offer. So I know there are a couple of days left to the deadline. Deadline is 2 p.m. Central Time on Friday. And so there is still plenty of time for things to happen. And, I'm sure there will be at least one move made before Friday's over. But at this point, you're trading fourth line guys, and so the return for those is just not going to be all that notable.
Yeah, you're probably not gonna get much back for him. I will say the one guy that would be interesting to see if they get moved, and I know you talked about Vancouver potentially being interested in him, John Merrill. I feel like if a team calls and has any interest in John Merrill, Bill Guerin is going to move him.
And especially because he has picked up his play lately. So I wonder if Merrill kind of knows what is going on here in like, hey, we've got some teams that are keeping an eye out. I better pick up my play a little bit if I really want the opportunity to head elsewhere. I'm with you. I think if anybody calls, I think that is pretty much a done deal. And even if not at this trade deadline, I do think the Wild will try to move Merrill in the offseason. I think with how this extension with him has played out, I don't know if he's going to want to come back here and be a 7th or an 8th defenseman. When he could potentially get a chance to play every day somewhere else. It's not going to surprise me at all if he's gone. So hopefully Bill Guerin's listening to this. If somebody does call, if anybody calls, especially Vancouver, get it done, make it happen. Whatever the return is, just make it happen to free up that roster spot. We will talk about some of the potential fits for a couple of Wild players, Connor Dewar and Brandon Duhaime most notably, as well as a couple of big ticket ideas for trades that the Wild should take a look at as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Sleeper. With a couple of months left in the NHL season and teams pushing to the playoffs, the Wild pushing to the other end of the spectrum, you can still win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether your favorite Minnesota Wild players, such as Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson or Brock Faber, will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is also brought to you by Robinhood Retirement. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gives you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Coming up tomorrow, we will take a look at the question that I had seen on the Twitterverse, asking about if the Wild are indeed just a couple of pieces away from being serious contenders. So that's coming up for you on tomorrow's show, as we'll also get you ready for the Arizona Coyotes to start the back-to-back on the road coming up here tomorrow night and Friday. Isaac Johnson joining us here today to take a look at some of the biggest trade pieces the Minnesota Wild have available here at the deadline. Isaac, let's talk about Brandon Duhaime first. What are some of the things that Brandon Duhaime could offer to a contender if he were indeed traded from the Minnesota Wild to a playoff team here by Friday?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a guy who could bring some energy. He plays with good speed. He's great on the penalty kill. So, yeah, I think there's obviously a lot he could offer a team that's, in contention, especially, if, maybe as a second option for some of these teams that, haven't, maybe aren't able to get, some of the other guys, maybe they could get Duhaime. I personally would love to see him stay. But yeah, I think there definitely are going to be some teams asking about him come Friday and, probably even before then.
Yeah, I obviously would like to see Duhaime stay. He's been on the show multiple times, including the first ever, I think, player guest on Locked on Wild. So would love to see him stay because I think he is I think he's a valuable contributor, but not likely to get what he's looking for in free agency here on a new deal. And it just seems like the writing has kind of been on the wall. There's been no negotiations with his agent or Connor Dewar's agent in regards to an extension. So it really feels like this is the end of the line for those two. And so you look at Duhaime, he's physical. He skates with a lot of speed. He is able to help you out on the penalty kill and is just a good, like, high motor spark kind of a player. And being able to throw him in on a fourth line for a contending team, I think has value, especially as a rental guy that you can bring in for the playoff push and the postseason and then just let him head elsewhere. Russo and Joe Smith had noted that if Bill Guerin gets somewhere around a second round pick, he's probably pulling the trigger on that. And I think that would be a good value for a guy like Duhaime. Then again, the Colorado Avalanche in one of their trades today sent a first round pick out. There have been a couple of first round picks that were traded here today. And so there is the possibility that a team gets panicky in trying to counter these moves that were made and says, here's our first round pick, in which case, if Bill Guerin doesn't make that move, what are you doing? Let's talk a little bit about Connor Dewar. What are some of the things that you like about what Connor Dewar brings to the table and what he could bring to a playoff contender?
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see, if they get moved. I think Connor Dewar is also probably someone you would say a contending team would be interested in, because he kind of provides the same things Duhaime does. So, I would say that those two would probably be the most interesting two players on this team to watch as the deadline gets closer.
And on the Connor Dewar perspective, he's got 9 goals on the season and is somebody, again, who, like Brandon Duhaime, maybe not as fast, but still has speed. He can play the center position, and so that has value as a fourth line guy. Can play the penalty kill, can give you quality fourth line minutes, and so he certainly would have value as well. Russo and Joe Smith, when looking at the potential return for Connor Dewar, said that a mid-round pick is more likely for him, but the opportunity here is to open up a roster spot for the likes of Murat, who's Nadinov, to get him playing time, which I think we can both agree, Isaac, that opening up the roster spots is the more valuable thing that you're getting than what you're getting in return for these guys, unless somebody throws you a first round pick. It's all about creating the roster spots for next year, for the rest of this year and beyond, to give some other players an opportunity to get some playing time.
Yeah, and who's Nadinov is going to need a spot because they're going to burn that first year of the ELC. So, by burning that, having him sit up in the press box would be, well, I would say kind of a waste to take a guy and burn the first year of that, rookie ELC. So he definitely will need a spot. I know that he's still trying to get all of his immigration stuff figured out, so it could still be a while before he gets here. I don't know how long that kind of stuff takes, but but when he does get here, he's going to need somewhere to play in this lineup.
Let's finish today's episode by playing Stay or Go. We'll go through some names that are locked into extensions or are potentially going to be free agents coming up, and we'll just go through the list and debate whether or not they should be looked at to be moved or kept. We'll do that to finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is also brought to you by Indeed. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Folks, one of the things as someone looking for a new job myself that I enjoy most about Indeed is that it will take the qualifications other jobs are looking for and will help me match my qualifications to better give me the opportunity to find that new job. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Topal joined by Isaac Johnson. Isaac, we're going to finish with stay or go. And so I will throw you a name, and you tell me whether that player should stay or go. And I'm going to start you with a tough one here. Filip Gustavsson. If you were the GM, if you were able to do whatever you wanted to do, would you keep Filip Gustavsson or would you try to find a trade partner for him?
Yeah, this one is a tough one. He's had a few rough games. I know that game against the Sharks wasn't his greatest. You know, my thing is, like, I don't want to bring Wallstedt up here too early. So, like, I feel like he needs to play down in Iowa. And I feel like that time shouldn't be interrupted before next season. I don't really want to trade Gustafsson for, like, another, like, mid goalie. I feel like the only way I would trade Gustafsson is if, like, you could go get, like, Jacob Markstrom or, like, Linus Ullmark or something like that. I would do it, but otherwise I would keep him for this season. Maybe something happens in the summer. Right now, I would say, I don't know. That's tough. I mean, I feel like you would listen. Like, I feel like Guerin should listen, but if he doesn't get a good enough offer, I would say keep him.
Yeah, I'm in that same spot. I would definitely listen. I would definitely entertain offers for Filip Gustavsson, because here's a scenario that you could have, and I know it's nice to have two goalies you can rely upon. If we're gonna have Jesper be here next year, it's nice to have two goalies you can rely upon. But would you rather have Wallstedt learn next to Filip Gustavsson and compete with him for a job? Or let's say, and people are going to roll their eyes at this, but hear me out. Let's say Marc-Andre Fleury wants to come back for 1 year as the backup. Would you rather have him get the opportunity? Because this team is going to be hampered again next year. And it's a season that's going to probably have a similar feel to it than this one. Would you rather have Jesper cut his teeth with a bunch of NHL starts with Fleury as his backup? Or would you rather have him be 1B to Filip Gustavsson and have Gustafsson be 1A? Just something to consider for how the goalie situation could play out here over the next couple of seasons. I don't know. If it's me, I definitely listen on offers for Filip Gustavsson, to say the least. Will we? I guess we'll see. Let's go to another name here. Jake Middleton. Jake Middleton is another one that is, I think, in a similar category. He's got next year on his contract as well as this year too. Would you keep Jake Middleton, or would you look to trade Middleton here either at the deadline or in the offseason?
It's funny. I was just listening to Judd's Hockey Show, and they were talking about this too today, and it got me thinking, like, you like Jake Middleton because, I mean, he's just a great guy. He's got great personality. When they got him, what was it, a couple of years ago when they traded Capo, I was like, who's Jake Middleton? I've never heard of this guy. And he's came in and played really well. Again, kind of with Gustafsson, like, I listen to offers, but like, if you can't get anything good, if all you're getting is a bag of pucks back, I keep them, but I definitely would entertain the idea.
Yeah, I feel like at this point you got to at least entertain the possibility of trading these guys. But ultimately, whether you do or whether you don't, we're probably more in the don't trade than we are in the trade category for both of those guys. Here's the other one, and this is a massive swing on this. Jared Spurgeon.
Oh, wow. That I definitely don't see happening. That would be a surprise move if it did. I mean, I think Spurgeon could get you a ton back. I feel like, well, right now he's hurt, so I don't know if teams are going to like jump on that. I guess I need to know like what I'd be able to get for him before I say yes or no. I know that doesn't answer the question, but I would kind of need to know what I would get for him. But
sure. Because here's my thoughts on the Spurgeon scenario. As you said, he is currently injured and 2 major surgeries. So the potential for him to he's got to show he's healthy before you even entertain that. But you've got Brock Faber, who will be signed to an extension in the very near future, probably in the offseason. That's going to probably be somewhere around $7 or $8 million per season. So then you have him locked in. You've got Spurgeon locked in at 7.5. You got Jonas Brodin locked in at 6. And that's a lot of money for your defense. Kirill Kaprizov needs a new deal. And if I want to add anything to this team, it's on offense. And so if you're going to free up a big chunk of money to be able to go get a major piece, it's highly unlikely, considering that Jared Spurgeon is your captain and Bill Guerin values his presence tremendously. It's highly unlikely, but again, you have to entertain offers for it, I think. I think you at least have to be willing to listen, because what do we know, Isaac, about NHL GMs? They're kind of crazy. Like, yes. You could, if you don't even pick up the phone, you could miss out on somebody majorly overpaying to where you get a couple of young players, couple first-round picks. You could get a can't-miss offer. So I think you definitely have to at least answer the phone on Jared Spurgeon.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. But, I mean, and I feel like he could get you a lot back, so it definitely would be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this week goes And we will, of course, have you covered every step of the way here on Locked On Wild. So make sure that you follow along so you don't miss out on any new content as we gear up for the trade deadline. We'll have reactions to any trades the Minnesota Wild make. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out throughout the rest of the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.